Hello everybody, it's me, Uncle You.
And it is me, Magic Mensch.
You've probably noticed this video length is a lot smaller than the last one. We were gonna do a video about CG animation next, but because work has been absolute hell lately, I had to reformat things, and I wanted to try a shorter episode anyway, so that's why this one's only about like 30 to 40 minutes. I'm just guessing. I have no idea what the actual video length is.
Chit Chat time with John K. I started in cartoons, if you can believe it, back in the 1980s, which was kind of the dark ages of cartoons. They were really boring, and the cartoonists really didn't have any creativity. We didn't have any say in what we were doing. We just had to draw these evil scripts that script writers would write for us. And literally, they were everyone I knew, all the cartoonists, we were young back then in our 20s, we all hated it. We all wanted to kill ourselves. Kids, you know, if you're watching this, don't kill yourself. Unless you work on some crummy cartoons.
Do you know how many starving African babies would kill for a nice face like this? Do you?
Mensch, you and I... Oh, I talked over you. Rude of me. You and I are both animators / artists, but the thing is, we're both working on our own projects. You with Minerva Jones, and me with, well, comics and my own movie I've been working on for the past year or so.
You've always just been kind of working on a lot of stuff, though.
Did you start out as a 3D modeler first, or a writer first?
I guess when I got my first start doing anything art related, I was a writer. I was supposed to be like the script writer and handling everything like that for Minerva Gems at the time was called Rebel Gems. It was very different. I have a whole thread of it on Twitter talking about the whole history of it. If you could plug it, I'd appreciate it, because I've been spending a long time working on it. I'm not even done with it yet. There is so much history that has happened with my project. I literally started it back in like 2016 when I was like still in high school. But getting back on topic, I was a writer first, and then I decided to pick up 3D animation to help Battery with the process, and I've really enjoyed it ever since.
My writing career, I guess, started out with fan fiction. Really embarrassing Yu-Gi-Oh fan fiction, I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know what your fanfic was, but it probably wasn't as edgy as mine.
Mine wasn't edgy, it was horny. Lots of sex.
Mine was like very typical, like edgy Shadow the Hedgehog, like postal kind. No, I'd say hatred would be more apt. My stuff has always been sort of gem related, because at least it was one of my first obsessions when I kinda, I guess, got on the internet during high school, was like Steven Universe stuff. And me and a friend wanted to make a little webcomic about some of the ideas we got. And the series it didn't really have a name yet. It wasn't called Minerva Gems, it was called Rebel Gems. It wasn't really called anything. It was just kind of something me and my friend kept to each other. And basically the plot was this half gem dude had a grudge against Pearl from Steven Universe because she tried to kill him at some point, and the entire kind of plot was centered around him struggling with the desire for revenge, but also he wanted to get over it, but he could never make up his mind what he wanted to do.
Going back to what I was talking about, I started with fan fiction, then I wanted to make comics. I made comics in Honey Select, which is I'm just gonna say what it is. It's a hentai comic, and you can definitely tell I was a writer first, because there were plenty of times where I just loaded upon text in a single panel. It's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, wasn't another artist who's like kind of like an actual artist that's known for that is wait, is he an artist or is he just a writer? Alan Moore.
Alan Moore does stuff a lot of writing into his comics, but at the same time, he has good paneling to break it up. I didn't.
Because I do know that like a hallmark of Alan Moore's stuff, at least in comics, is that they have like humongous boxes of text sometimes.
Yeah. He's not even the worst offender. But
And
Yeah.
We always have to bring up Chris Chan at least once in these podcasts.
So later on, it evolved to commissioning artists. It started. I started commissioning a guy named Indrox. He did a lot of great work for me. It was briefly Nebula Weasel, and then later on it was a guy named Petrin, and all of which have like very different styles. And then I kind of started. I drawing my own stuff with 3D models from Koikatsu underneath. I'm trying to move away, or at least not be as reliant on that. Like
one thing I will say. There is one of our friends who I think you and I will agree, who has an amazing art style, who I will always I'm really excited to ask for help. Patrick, he always gives amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, Patrick is an incredible artist. No,
we'll also link his DeviantArt page. Give it a watch. He has some very nice, cute art.
I'm still very dialogue heavy, but I am a lot better like when it comes to visuals.
I will say I'm the exact opposite. I really love writing character actions and describing scenes and describing emotions. I am terrible with dialogue, though. I never have any idea what I'm supposed to make the characters say.
What I like to do, depending on the project, I like to do like a rough outline and that of what I want to happen, what are my goals, and I remember how all the characters are and sort of go off of the dialogue there. Because my stuff tends to not be super plot heavy anyways. I write very slice of life kind of things. And if I need more in-depth dialogue, I kind of work from there. I think it's called something like writing by the seat of your pants. Or
at least for me, I subscribe a lot more to the whole like Gendy Tartakovsky kind of philosophy for making stuff, where it's just like the action is first, like the actions need to speak louder than the words. Like the what is important with animation, at least to me, is what you see, and it can tell a lot about what is going on. Something that I really adore is, at least when like either animes or cartoons or something will have a very dramatic scene where they could normally just have like a bunch of sappy dialogue, and they play the scene almost completely silently and have just like, the emotion and the tension build up. I think a great example of this is in Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Main's death doesn't have too much dialogue. There's of course like some dialogue as like he's snarking as he's like killing these dudes and they're like screaming and shit, but there's no like monologue about shit. And when Main says what he needs to, he keeps it short.
Yeah,
like Dorio's dead, she didn't make it, and you need to run.
Yeah,
like that's all he had to communicate.
Yeah, animation is a great place to have like those kind of moments, because there's an art to making a character just sit around and do nothing in a lot of ways. Like there's an anime called Violet Evergarden. The character is not very talkative and not super expressive in the face, but you're still able to get her emotions just from like her little actions, the way she interacts with characters. So there's right now kind of a debate about writer-driven animation versus animator-driven animation, and some people hearing this are probably going, well, what the heck? Doesn't the animators lead the animation? I mean, it's in the name, and you'd be surprised.
At least to me, before I knew how like all this stuff kind of worked, like at least more the intricacies about it. I guess I just kind of learned this stuff in high school. I always thought of like, oh, like a group of people come together. One's the writer, one's the this, one's the that, and it isn't like that actually.
No, it's not. Like sometimes the process can vary wildly. Sometimes, they come up with a script and bring it in. Other times they storyboard first and then just go off of that. And storyboard driven animation tends to be led by the animators, and something where it's the script and then they kind of make storyboards for that is more writer focused. Now,
there is a lot of common traits that a lot of these two different styles of making productions tend to be, though.
Yeah.
There's like very, very clear differences, and once you start noticing these details, you can't unnotice it.
Yeah. The thing is, for most of animation's life, from like the 1910s into the 1930s, it was strictly animator focused, because animators were completely in charge, and most animation was done in short, so there wasn't a lot of time for dialogue, if they could do dialogue even. In fact, if you look at early shorts of Winsor McCay basically set up all his animations as if he was a magician doing a magic act. No, literally, the first short he ever did, which was just him mucking about with it, Little Nemo animation, with like really gorgeous fluid animation. The first 6 minutes are him making the cartoon and hyping out. It's like, behold my magical wonder!
Behold, I make the thing move!
Yeah. And to be fair, it is gorgeous movement. Have you ever seen it?
I have not. Can I see it?
No. Okay.
Oh, look, blackface.
You gotta deal with this stuff. But yeah, this is clearly Winsor McCay flexing on people. It's like, yeah, look what I'm doing.
It's very nice, but again, hey, look, blackface.
Yeah. This character...
I imagine in the editing, I'm yellow guy from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Hey, look.
I look blackface. That was it for a lot of animation. And even stuff that was more dialogue driven. Like, let's use Red Hot Riding Hood, for instance. That Tex Avery has... I think he's underrated with how he does voice direction and sort of, like, dialogue-driven jokes. But, of course, the thing is, he's legendary for his, reactions and comedic takes. Like, this is still really funny stuff and really funny animation. But just every move. But, come in mid to late 40s and 1950s, there started to be a much different thought process when it came to animation. Sort of more dialogue-driven animation. And probably one of the biggest ones, UPA. UPA have a fascinating history. They were kind of one of the first unionized animation studios, and they were also, ran by the artists. And the interesting thing about them is that, of course, they didn't have the budgets for, like, lush Disney visuals, so they, a lot of the time, were a lot more dialogue-focused. But...
yeah, they made the designs, like, very, very, like, simple, too, which I think is a strength.
Yeah, no, UPA is one of the most visually diverse animation studios you can find. They did this one short I love, an adaptation of The Telltale Heart that has barely any animation.
Ooh, I've seen that. It's very, very good. The atmosphere really, really well.
Telltale Heart is gorgeous. It's in my like top 10 animated shorts ever. But the thing is, so there was a push for dialogue, and then came television, and television budgets were notoriously small. You just couldn't do a lot. And
unless you were Superman, but that wasn't on TV, was it?
No, that was theatrical.
Superman.
Yeah, that was theatrical shorts. There were...
That's so weird. That's so weird to me that they had just these like shorts play in theaters and they weren't on TVs. That's just like, I can't imagine that now because that's just not a part of our culture anymore.
Well, that was the thing. When you went to the movies, you saw multiple things. Sometimes you would see 2 movies, sometimes you see a newsreel and an animated short.
That's nice. I think that's interesting. But again, in this day and age, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, which is a shame. But anyhow, so the thing is, early TV animation was very limited in terms of like cartoony movement. Like you didn't get a lot of like piss take animation or like very big exaggerated expressions. Sometimes they did try, like there's an early Yogi Bear short where they actually do try to get some okayly, that's a word now, some like okay cartoony reactions by basically making the animation nothing but key poses. Like there's no in-betweens.
Yeah, like actions happen like really quickly.
And the thing is, I actually don't think this was a bad way of doing it for the time, and at least, and the designs are at least charming enough that it kind of works. Filmation, the old joke about them is that they talk about the crazy stuff going on off screen, but like the animation was remarkably limited. Like, notice how the characters are cropped in such a way that they don't even have to animate their mouths opening behind the binoculars.
Go back. Go back to the helicopter. I like that they put the helicopter's propellers out of frame so they didn't have to animate the propellers.
Something Hanna-Barbera would do is that they would is that they would sort of give their characters a collar so that they could animate the neck moving up and down without actually having to show the neck muscles moving. But whereas Filmation was a lot stiffer. Although I will say there is one off topic. There is one scene in like one of the early Flintstones cartoons where you see Barney shirtless and him talking with his head bobbing up and down, and it's kind of terrifying.
Oh, that does not look good.
Come to the 1980s, because animation was now a lot more outsourced, you didn't really want to play, well, as one of the animation directors for The Real Ghostbusters put it, you didn't want to do essentially a game of animation telephone, because, you know, something that's like maybe clear as day in like what you wrote down on the script or the storyboard might be taken the wrong way when it's being animated in Korea or Japan. And I want to clarify something like with The Real Ghostbusters. I think it actually has pleasing animation, but it's still very much writer driven. And like there's good poses. Of course, when it comes to the ghosts get a lot.
And it has the typical 90s style.
80s, but close enough.
80s style.
Well,
late 80s.
What's a decade apart? Of course, with like the backgrounds and like some of the ghosts, you'd get a lot of like creative animation. But of course, you know, you're not going to see the human characters go off model too much, which works well enough in a show like Ghostbusters, but you don't get funny movements. You don't get like funny reactions. It's all very, very strictly on model, and kind of, you know, they still have to keep to like a certain body proportions.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because that's how the 80s were. It was just a lot more dialogue. It was a lot more dialogue focused. Even comedy cartoons like Galaxy High, which could have some very creative and fun animation designs, still kind of kept it a little bit safe.
Yeah. The show you're showing me right now, I know this is going to be like a nonsensical thing to say, but I think if Jimmy Neutron was in a 2D style, I think it would probably look something like this.
Are you just saying that because the guy looks like Carl Weezer, just with six arms?
Yes.
Though, the funny thing is John Kay actually worked on this show, which that leads us perfectly, because in the early 90s, there was a huge resurgence in the demand for animation around this time, thanks to stuff like Who Framed Roger Rabbit coming out and the early days of the Disney Renaissance. So animation budgets were bigger than they've ever been, and Nickelodeon were asking for creator-driven animation. And this led to them greenlighting 3 cartoons. It was from 3 established creators. One was Rugrats from Klasky Chupo, who were already known for animating on The Simpsons. Another was Doug, who Jim Jenkins was known for doing some really fun bumpers for TV back in the day. And finally, there was Ren and Stimpy from John Kay and Spumco, because he was already kind of known in the comics scene at the time.
Real quick, when did Rocko's Modern Life come into the mix? Was that like a creator-driven thing or no?
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
Because the thing is, Nickelodeon wanted to be a TV network that felt like it was ran by kids. And so they let their creators be a lot more visually inventive. Like, Ren and Stimpy looked like no other cartoon out at the time. It's very ugly. Famously, there was a lot of room for going off model. I should note that like there was kind of an art to off model animation, because I feel like with Ren and Stimpy in the early days, like it never felt like, ugh, this is just unpleasant to look at. These characters are just fun to squish and stretch.
They do a lot.
Whereas I kind of feel like Adult Party Cartoon, like some of the aspects of that show aside, there's something really kind of unpleasant to look at with the characters.
I think the thing that I absolutely hate, and I will never forgive Adult Party Cartoon, I do not like the way they designed Ren.
Actually, what's funny is I hate the way they drew Stimpy more. There's just...
I think he looks like unrecognizable compared to the original Ren. This Ren is just a lot more mean-spirited.
Yeah, I just hate the way they drew Stimpy. He always looks like he's coked out of his mind 24/7, and I really hate the choice of yellow around his eyes. But that's getting beside the point.
Yeah, Ren looks fine here. He looks very simple. He goes into like these off-model, really big expressions and stuff. I don't think he has that for adult party cartoon, because every time he does a face in adult party cartoon, he either looks like a man or he goes feral. He doesn't have weird faces. He just either looks like a man or goes feral.
I think the problem is that, like, I feel like there was a point where John K kind of lost the art to simplify or limited animation, because I think John K's simpler designs are way funnier than when he gets more detailed. Like that. That's just detailed enough to get the joke across, but like his pupils are very simply drawn.
Ren always reminded me of like a spore creature.
and they have like episodes where they're a little bit more detailed, but they add on the details to accentuate the joke. Whereas if they're super detailed 24/7, you know what? We need to stop. We need to, let's save this when we actually talk about. But yeah, and it's funny going to Rugrats. Have you ever seen the Rugrats pilot?
I have not.
So the Rugrats pilot was interestingly in that it was directed by Peter Chung, who's like this super artsy animator, and as a result,
Ooh, you can tell.
The Rugrats pilot is he's super fluid and like has some very weird angles, but
I find Aeon Flux to be like borderline uncomfortable to watch, but God, is it fucking.
This is no better in terms of making you uncomfortable. Like that. I don't ever want to be in this child's mouth. Thank you. Stu, your neck.
Oh, I actually kind of like the way he looks.
No, I think visually it's great. And even when like in the
I like
early,
this angular motif, like everything's like a sharp edge. I like that actually.
obviously they couldn't have Peter Chung on at all times. They still had some very visually creative stuff. Like the angles were always just slightly off, or there'd be like some funny reactions every so often.
I like the weird color choices in Rugrats.
It's funny we associate Rugrats as like being a baby show, but then again, they are always, the funny thing is with Rugrats is the creators strictly said, don't make the babies too cute, make them kind of ugly. And I think that actually kind of helps the show. It prevents it from being, too overly cute. And it is a little bit more dialogue driven than Ren and Stimpy, obviously, but at the same time, there still feels like there's a happy balance. Fun designs, but at the same time, visual enough.
I love that scene with Stu.
Oh yeah, where Stu screens it. That's very dialogue focused too, but at the same time, the drawings are just right. Like Stu really does look done with life, and of course he comes into the room, gets the chocolate pudding. And when he hears it, Dee Dee's face too. So that's kind of an example of Happy Boss. But during the 90s, there was like a push. There's still this aspect of like writer-driven cartoons. There's a show called The Critic, which Gendy Tartakovsky worked on, and he called it very unpleasant to work on. Because it was definitely written not exactly being animation focused. Like there weren't a lot of great animation gags initially. It was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like The Critic, but it also just comes with the territory that the series is like literally about a movie critic. You have to have a lot of dialogue, and you have to have someone at the helm of the writing who knows what they're actually talking about.
Yeah, and particularly in the first season, there isn't a lot of like really funny animation. There are some nice bits here and there, and I think the designs are pleasing enough.
Also, the kid of The Critic looks like Steven Universe.
Classic joke. But mind you, I will say, come season 2, they simplified the designs and made it, and also upped the budget for the animation. And now you could actually have a little bit more animation, like level jokes.
A bit more zaniness to it. Oh, that reminds me. Didn't The Critic like show up like a lot of times in The Simpsons?
He showed up twice. Once as in like a guest episode, and the other time in an insane asylum. Like The Critic, whenever people look at clips from the critic. Typically, they're from season 2, which is when like I think they had a lot better like visual like humor.
And nothing of value was lost.
Yeah, but let's bring up the big one, and the one that got me thinking about Das Simpsons.
Apu, why does your voice sound like that?
That's my favorite episode. But no, so the thing is with The Simpsons is that Matt Groening technically is a cartoonist, but not kind of the cartoonist people would expect.
Keep going. I have opinions about his work.
Yeah, no, I'll make it real quick. The thing is, there was I believe, like he made a post on Twitter where he was like, oh, I wish we had the style of animation The Simpsons has now. And a lot of people were like, why? It's so stiffer now. And the thing is, if you look at Matt Groening's comics, that's kind of what they were. Matt Groening...
Yeah, because I know a lot of his stuff is like the character... There's one comic where it's just like the rabbit character, and it's literally the same frame like 9 fucking times, and with like tons and tons of like stupid dialogue. It's like, what is this? What are you putting out? This isn't funny.
Yeah, Matt Groening is one of those, like, he's kind of like the old joke you get about like how political cartoonists, particularly a lot of left-wing ones, are just like words upon words upon words, and I don't think that's particularly fair 100%. He does have like some good strips here and there, but it kind of shows what kind of cartoon he is. It reminds me a lot of like Captain Tomorrow. I think it's called Captain Tomorrow. I don't remember. It was a very similar thing. If you watch The Simpsons, very rarely do they have like animation that's funny. You know, like a lot. Not they don't go like off model too much. When there's episodes run by David Silverman, for instance, David Silverman will put some funny looking animation. I'll use this great one from like when he's making moon waffles. Homer shuts the door with his ass. That's already kind of funny. And he just becomes weirdly fluid when he's making his moon waffles. Just like that's that's funny animation.
Yeah.
Detail of the waffle being this disgusting mess, and the way he flicks the butter. What? Am I calling The Simpsons a bad show? No, fucking funny. But it does show. But it's definitely a lot more writer focused. I was at a bar one day and I saw this show called Crapopolis, and I immediately could tell just from looking at it on a bar TV that this is very like not funny animation. It's very stiff. Everything's at this kind of like, everything looks like those bitch strip comics that get shared on Facebook, you know, stock poses.
Yeah, it's very stiff, very slow. All the characters just talk around, and there's no like anything funny going on. You know, a recent show that is kind of a guilty pleasure for me, even though it is just kind of a Family Guy ripoff.
What?
Forget About It.
Well, I think Forget About It is a little bit better. Forget About It does have like a decent reaction every so often, and at least has
very snappy too. It doesn't linger too long on one thing.
Yeah, and like it is. I wouldn't call it like a fantastic show, but there's attempts at sort of very funny visual humor.
It is very simple, just like, you know, regular standard like Flash like puppet kind of animation. But I think it at least tried.
I think some of these designs are genuinely kind of fun. And whereas this is just very clearly stock, and it's that very slow kind of half frame by frame, half tweening style.
Also, it looks like a very, very low quality Rick and Morty art style.
Danny Antonucci brought up how there's a problem where a lot of people who come into animation kind of have this thing where they write a sitcom with the same level of like framing and the like.
Stuff in your style.
They knew when they would come to us for something that they were coming to us for a reason, not to try to mold us or shape us into something they want.
Right.
They're coming to us because of us.
Right.
That doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare. I mean, now you've got writers who are doing animation, and it's like half the bloody animated TV shows are all writer shows, or comedians now being animation people.
Right.
Please go back to your thing, whatever you do. Stay out of the animation.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like it feels like an episode of The Big Bang Theory.
and the thing is with Danny Antonucci, he's one of the best when it comes to animation-driven comedy. Like, there's this great clip which is like how does an animator approach this scenario? It's like, oh, one character just hops over, other character goes through. And the thing is, it's one thing for like a sitcom writer would probably come up with the solution. Oh, he just slams through the door, and that's not a bad response. An animator, however, would come up with this.
Yeah, he fucking breaks all logic. It just completely does something out you're not expecting, and that's totally in character with Ed. He's stupid, but he also does things that are just completely out of pocket.
Ed, Edd n Eddy has some of the best comedic animation ever. And there are just so many great shots and angles and motions. It knows when to go fast and knows when to go slow. Like, this shot here of, like, Double D's realization is so perfect. Slowly shuts the door, slowly locks it, has a moment of, like, just staring off into space, is trying to process, and then... And the thing is, Ed, Edd n Eddy also has terrific sound design for animation. And the thing is, I love that the animation is funny enough that you're able to tell immediately what's going on, why are the characters feeling like this, and how do you do. And also, all the Eds have their own run cycle and kind of way of movement, too. And meanwhile, Krapopolis doesn't. This kind of animation style, like that half in between Flash and, like, Toon Boom, is a real problem, too. Because it hurts, like, the way you could do sort of comedic jokes. Like, you can get decent, you might be able to get some decent timing in there, but you can't get funny animation. Here's the thing about Family Guy. Family Guy, I actually think, can have really funny animation.
They surprisingly do a lot.
I think Family Guy has genuine, like, great comedic timing and pacing. You look at this fight scene, it's visually creative and fun. Jesus Christ.
Another thing I appreciate is, like, the angle of this, like, so it is just like a 2D, like, background, but it's, like, moving. There's camera shots with it. There's zoom-ins. They do a lot. It's not just, like, oh, static shot of this thing, then they cut to another angle with it. The camera is doing stuff too. It's helping.
Like, there's so much going on that I actually look so fun. I forgot that Meg does, like, a Hurricane Rana here. Yeah. And this also takes into like an unused advantage that I think people forget about Toon Boom and Flash tweening. You can have, like, continuously moving cameras. Like, I think this utilizes it to a full effect. Or, like, this is funny and visually inventive stuff, and even when there are, like, jokes with Family Guy that are, like, a little bit more standing still have, like, a funny joke, and also have comedic timing that you can only do in animation.
It's commendable. I think they just do a lot, and I still think that's what separates Family Guy from a lot of, like, other animations that try to ape it. That doesn't mean that, you know, Family Guy is, like, so amazing show, but they try, and I think that's going to be the mission statement for all of these podcasts. Giving a shit and trying makes a difference.
The worst episode of Family Guy is when they're trying to do drama. Like, there's that...
Yeah.
Because suddenly all of Family Guy's strengths go out the window, and this is a big problem with a lot of writer-focused animation. I'm going to get into one controversial example in a bit, but here, all of Family Guy's strengths is missing. There's no, like...
Yeah.
There's no great lighting, no great expression. It's very flat, and...
You know what I think is, like the actual worst episode of Family Guy, in my opinion?
What?
I've seen clips of it, and it's just incredibly uncomfortable. It's that episode where Stewie and Brian get locked in the bank, it's very unfunny, and
I know
there's literally a scene where Brian eats Stewie's shit.
Yeah, which that's the most infamous part. But also the thing is, a great cinematographer or animator could take this scenario and make it visually interesting. Like they could show like pans from like the top of the vault to show just how like vast and also unescapable it is. But no, it's mostly at floor level and the characters just sitting
or close up. I know it's like if you want to make it feel claustrophobic, you get up close, but I don't think this does that, especially in this situation, because everything's just so flat looking.
Yeah. And this brings me to one. Okay, I'm gonna make some enemies here, and I understand that there are people.
Yeah, this is something even I sort of disagree on, but I'll let you finish.
Here's the thing I feel about BoJack Horseman. Oh boy, I understand if people like the show, but my problem with BoJack Horseman is that while it is a little more visually detailed than a lot of like Family Guy animation, but the problem is it's still directed and written like a lot of sitcoms. You know, it's character A reacts, character B reacts, and there's not a lot of like interesting movements and facial reactions. Because a problem with this show is that, and a lot of other Family Guy clones or adult animation, is that they stay way too on model, and that means you can't get a big emotional response. Like, think about like that scene from the early Simpsons where Bart fails his test. That animation is heartbreaking. You can just feel all the frustration and pain in there. Like, everything is there. That is his emotion spilling out. Oh, and I don't think it has to be like a big outburst, but there's at the same time not enough here. This is the scene where BoJack admits like his feelings and like how all he wants is to be happy. It's good writing, but
the faces and the expressions are good enough. I like the writing of BoJack Horseman. I know a lot of people find it insufferable, and there is insufferable moments. I think it's just one of those things, either you love it or you hate it, and it's just down to what you're willing to watch a character do and go through and understand about it. I don't think there's anything wrong with disliking it or liking it. But I definitely do agree that sometimes the visuals can get incredibly samey all the time, and that just comes down to the fact that, again, it's another one of those very stilted, puppet-based animation shows. I don't think it's a Family Guy ripoff per se.
No,
they definitely made it so it's very easy to animate.
Yeah, no, you know what I mean, like the puppety animation. And the thing is, this kind of direction works in a live action sitcom because you're able to have the actors just give all the reactions, all they need with this. Like they can do like either like the most over the top, most subtle like facial reactions, and they can just let the actors sort of express whatever they need to.
Now, there is a couple episodes of BoJack Horseman where the fact that they're animals does come up to play a little bit, or they do kind of play with it. The underwater episode is actually really good in my opinion, because it plays a lot with like the plot of it is that BoJack Horseman is trying to tell somebody something, but that person is underwater, and he literally cannot explain it because he can't talk underwater.
Like, I think there are still like a decent visual here and there. I'm not saying BoJack is like the biggest like criminal. This is like one of the examples that kind of frustrates me and kind of.
I like that the bus handlebars are hooks.
Like, okay, yeah, that is legit funny.
There's a lot of visual gags in this episode that's not there with like a lot of other episodes. I think they put a lot of effort into this one in comparison to the rest of the show.
I kind of prefer Tuca and Birdie when that show came out, because Tuca and Birdie has a lot of like good drama, but also I think is like a lot more visually interesting. Like, it's still that kind of, it's a similar software, but like Tuca and Birdie in comparison, I think utilizes things really well. Like it. Tuca.
Millie?
What?
Millie, please stop.
Oh.
Please stop. I'm recording. What do you need? Hello, I see you. I love you. What do you want? What do you want? All right, go on.
Mensch's cat is currently attacking him.
Okay, She came up behind me. I'm sitting on the floor in front of my microphone, recording right now. She came up behind me on the couch because I'm on the floor. She came behind me, went up to my ear, and went meow, meow, meow.
Yeah. Whereas, okay, using Tuca and Birdie has like emotional moments too, but also I feel like the animation has a lot more room to breathe. It kind of feels like
I think it's snappier.
Yeah, which I think is a strength of like of like this kind of tween animation. It can be very snappy, and I don't think a lot of people use it to that kind of advantage. So it's not.
It just sucks how the Tuca and Birdie show was treated by the execs, though.
And it's kind of interesting. Right now we're at a place where like I kind of feel like animation is trying to find that right balance. Like I feel like theatrical animation is kind of like a little bit more. Like the animators can be a little bit more. There are exceptions, obviously, but like I feel like a lot of like main television shows. There's a show called Rock Paper Scissors that's on Nickelodeon right now, and it just doesn't have funny animation. Like it's way too stiff and way too like and just you can't really do anything with. If this had Rocko's Modern Life animation or these designs could actually be really fun, but
or maybe even early SpongeBob, maybe.
SpongeBob actually is kind of interesting in this regard. I think SpongeBob is like a happy balance between funny dialogue and funny animation.
And it is artist driven, correct?
Very much so. SpongeBob actually might be the most artist driven cartoon on TV right now, because each SpongeBob season, it kind of feels like there's kind of like different direction going into it. Like
I do like that even modern SpongeBob like tries to make like always like really weird funny faces.
Yeah, and it's nice that we have that. I forget who's like the guy in charge of SpongeBob, but it kind of feels like he really likes letting the animators have.
Well, I mean, the guy who actually created SpongeBob, he's passed away.
Yeah, Steven Hillenburg passed away, and he obviously has a lot of experience writing and directing this kind of animation, because he kind of got a lot of attention thanks to being a big creator on Rocko's Modern Life. But SpongeBob, I think, is like a right balance where I feel like a lot of the animators can do a lot of really funny visuals. Like I saw this clip making the rounds online because people were going like, "Why is SpongeBob drawn like that?" And I don't care what anyone says. This is funny animation. The reason it does this is because it's basically a council of all the people who hate SpongeBob, recounting all their trauma with him, which I think is a really, really funny setup.
Yeah.
So I think SpongeBob can find that like happy balance. But now that being said, I think there is a trade-off with like animator-driven animation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get a case where the people in charge, like the animators, they clearly have like different styles for each episode. Like, oh, there it is. Give. And like Steven Universe is interesting because that's a show where, depending on who's in charge of storyboards that day, it can be very visually different. Sometimes it's pretty similar, and then other times it's very different. This is kind of a famous chart for Steven Universe because in some regards, like Paradox is pretty consistent face wise for the most part. And then you got Pearl, who
yeah, depending on who's boarding it, it looks borderline like a different character.
Pearl ranges from full head of hair with like a big forehead to George Costanza.
And then Bulbasaur.
Yeah, and this isn't a case like characters changing design as the show goes on, like Connie losing her height. This is a case where like some animators and storyboards just have a different vision. In fact, One Piece is interesting in that it's that kind of show too. Just because it's a weekly anime, sometimes they don't have as much room to flex. Other times there are just animators who when they're in charge of that episode of One Piece, they have a very distinct style. There's this animator I love for One Piece called Naoki Tate.
Yeah, that guy. He does great stuff whenever he's in charge of One Piece episodes.
I fucking miss him. Like, I miss his animation so much. Edge. Like, it really does feel like whenever he was in charge, he knew, like, exactly, like, the right drawing, because the motions are great. And it's funny, the line work's kind of messy, but charmingly messy. It feels like there's a lot of life into it. I love that scene of Boa Hancock's...
So extra.
Yeah. Like, he's not afraid to get ugly, and I don't think it works as much for Dragon Ball. I feel like here they were told, hey, you gotta stay a little bit more on model. It can still look really good, but my Tate is the one that just goes all out crazy. But then you got cases where, when they're in charge, they kind of overdo things, too. Like John K. It comes back to him. John K is very much animation-driven. The problem is, John K being in charge, well, one, leads to delays and mistreatment, but the other thing is, sometimes it's like, okay, I'll just add on things for the sake of adding on things, and it becomes sort of a visual mess, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything at all.
Yeah, like his Simpsons couch gags is like a great example, because too over the top and nothing kind of has impact as a result. It's visual noise. Like, it's very fluid, but it kind of doesn't work for me. And that's not getting into cans without labels.
You can't, cans notwithstanding.
Although I will say, it is kind of nice recently that a lot of anime has been sort of allowing animators to kind of get a lot more visually expressive. Like, One Piece in particular, One Piece has kind of become like a haven for like really expressive animators. There are a lot of American and European animators who are actually going over to Japan because, like, I want to work on One Piece. And it isn't like in a way of like, I desperately need work. It feels like I get to do the cartoony animation I can't do here. I can do fucking nutty stuff.
Yeah, I know one of the more famous examples, Ian Jones-Cordy, the guy who was working on OKKO, came over and worked on One Piece for a while.
Yeah, and God, look at this. This is visually dynamic and awesome, and it's very rubbery, but it feels, well, one, it makes sense that it's rubbery. It's Gear 5. Those who haven't seen One Piece, Gear 5 is Luffy's Super Saiyan form, but imagine Super Saiyan, but he runs on rubber hose cartoon logic.
Yeah.
And it's fucking great. And there's...
Honestly, I can't believe how far One Piece has come. I'm gonna be honest, not that Wano was bad, but I felt it just went on forever, man.
Yeah.
For 3 solid years, we were just stuck in Wano.
And I also will say for One Piece, there have been periods which are very visually boring. Like, I think Punk Hazard, I think Punk Hazard as an arc is fine, but I think it's one of the most visually, like...
You can tell Toei kind of didn't care right here.
The colors are very drab and kind of like and washed out, but not in a visually interesting washed out way. The movements aren't interesting. It feels very
like standard old anime animation to me.
It is weekly anime animation too. And there's also that one infamous shot of Nami where, God, it looks awful. It's the one where they're reacting to the giant robots and Nami looks anorexic as fuck. And I know obviously Nami has a very exaggerated figure because she's kind of supposed to be like Jessica Rabbit. Also, this shot also, like, I know Toei's animation doesn't help things here, but the accusations of same-face syndrome for One Piece females is not helping.
Their faces quite literally look copy and pasted.
Oh, except for Nico Robin's killer fucking chin. So that's kind of the thing with animator-driven animation, you need someone with like a clear vision and also the time to do it. I think the worst example for me is Jammers. If you want all the worst stereotypes about American animation in the 2010s, look at Jammers. Jammers is...
Also, the character looks like Little My.
Yeah, everyone points out the character looks like Little My. But the problem with Jammers is that it's just this hodgepodge of visual styles.
It's hideous.
It kind of wants to look like the noodly limb regular show characters, but without the comedic timing. It wants to do the exaggerated kind of gross animation, but they're way too polished to do anything with.
You know what, like 2000s animation I actually think is really good?
What?
Early Adventure Time.
Oh, for Early Adventure Time is great, but I feel like people forget that Adventure Time saved its kind of off-model designs for when it most needed it in the early days, and this is what happens if it's just like, oh, let's just do it at all times, because no, that otherwise it's not visually interesting, even though it's just very annoying. Whereas you compare it to a show like Smiling Friends, for a show that's known for like putting on like a million different art styles, Zach and Michael Cusack just being like, this guy's a cool animator, let's bring him on and have him do something funny.
Also, Smiling Friends doesn't go too off model.
Yeah. But it knows when to go off model when when there's a good reaction in store. Like that little bit of Alan sort of bobbing his head being sarcastic. Like that's funny but not too crazy. But then when a big emotion's like that.
I mean, I'd still say that's not off model, it's just a different angle, but with extra teeth.
Yeah. There's that great bit at the end where they're laughing about their adventure. And
the fucking thing that Pim's doing.
Well, like that's great, and and feels right at home. And Smiling Friends also knows how like limited animation can also be really funny.
There's a lot of commonalities I'm seeing between Smiling Friends and The Amazing World of Gumball.
Yeah, just showcasing a lot of animation style. Amazing World of Gumball has a great happy balance of writer-driven comedy and animator-driven comedy, and I think Smiling Friends also has that happy balance too. Ooh.
This is not shade towards Smiling Friends. I like it. I like Zach. This is gonna sound like really petty, but I think it's kind of disappointing that the only inspiration Zach will ever list to anything he does is The Simpsons, and he will list nothing else as an inspiration, and I think that's pretty shallow in my opinion.
I have a feeling Zach has like way more inspirations than he's letting on, and Michael Cusack too. I feel like because you watch this come on, like you see so many I can see so many little influences from not just other
influence from The Amazing World of Gumball
or other web animators or comedians. Zach has talked a lot about Norm Macdonald, and sometimes Zach does use Norm Macdonald-esque anti-comedy for better or worse. Actually, this actually went on a lot longer than I expected. So we're gonna move on to the other one we wanted to do. Because I only have 30 minutes to do so. I'm gonna mark where the cutoff point is for this. Addendum. There was leaks with the Ren and Stimpy reboot thing, and turns out it's more writer-driven, and the writers are like Stephen Colbert collaborators and writers from Three Busy Debras. Everything's awful. It's bad. I'm gonna go now. I'm sick. I got COVID. Sad. Very sad. Fuck you!